Hello everyone, how are you doing today? I decided to just do one little extra video here because it has become very apparent to me that the interwebs do not understand mental health, nor do they understand complex post-traumatic stress disorder and what it actually takes for somebody to have that. So we're going to have a little discussion about it today, and we're going to go through this article, and hopefully I can help educate the world.
Hello everyone, thanks so much for tuning in. My name is Beth, or Queen of Spade. Please do give this video a like, subscribe if you're new here. Now, without further ado, let's throw some spade.
So this is an article in Healthline. It's called Understanding Complex Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder. And we're just going to read through it, and I'm just going to maybe talk about some things as we go along. So what is complex post-traumatic stress disorder? What is it? You ask some people, they will tell you it doesn't exist. However, that's because it did not make it in its own category in the DSM-5, which is the Diagnostic and Statistics Manual. It is used by everyone to do the diagnostics. And also we use it for treatment as well. Those of us that are in the social service worker field, yes, I used to work in mental health myself. A lot of people don't realize that if you work in mental health for years as a social worker, you can also get post-traumatic stress disorder, complex post-traumatic stress disorder. The things that I have seen in the field are ridiculous. Nobody ever thinks of that. However, we're going to just have a little talk about what is complex post-traumatic stress disorder. What is it? Does it exist? Because apparently I made it up, guys. Yeah. So, most people are familiar with post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, an anxiety disorder that results from a traumatic event, such as natural disaster or car accident. So if you have one traumatic event happen to you, you can then get PTSD. It does not mean you're a weak person. It does not mean that you can't handle things. It does not mean any of the sort. It is something that you cannot control, and it can come to you at any time. So if you are someone in the world right now that is poorly judging people with this, you might want to just remember that. However, a closely related condition called complex post-traumatic stress disorder, CPTSD, is becoming more widely recognized by doctors in recent years. CPTSD, this is the important part because none of you guys don't seem to understand this part especially. CPTSD results from repeated trauma over months or years rather than a single event. So for example, I'll just give you a little example. I have a lot of people right now out in the world that are trying to get me to break my publication ban and further discuss the sexual assault that I am in court for right now. Like, I'm going through that. By saying that there's no way that I could have CPTSD just from an ass grab, because I just said the guy grabbed me, because that's all I can say. I have a publication ban. I cannot break it. It can actually hurt my sexual assault case. Unlike the victims of Onision, I'm actually going through court, and therefore I cannot speak on this. So I don't want to mess that up. However, that's not the case. CPTSD is from repeated trauma over months or years. So, for example, if you grew up with a narcissistic mom, you might have CPTSD. If you grew up with alcoholism for many years in your home, you might end up with CPTSD. If you grew up with child abuse for many years in your home, you might end up with CPTSD. If you then grow up and you get into abusive relationships back to back for many years, you could end up with CPTSD. And if you've gone through all of the above along with sexual assault, you can most certainly end up with CPTSD. So, just keep that in mind. And again, it doesn't mean you're a weak person at all. It really doesn't. That's something that really bothers me, is when people say people with PTSD or CPTSD are weak, they couldn't handle the situations, and that's why they have it. It can happen to you at any time. Any trauma that happens to you, guess what? You could get this, at least PTSD, unless you already have a history of trauma, in which case, then yes, one event with a history of trauma can then push you into CPTSD. So let's just keep that in mind out there in the world, just say. So what are the symptoms? The symptoms of CPTSD usually include those of PTSD plus an additional set of symptoms. So the symptoms of PTSD that CPTSD people also experience are reliving the traumatic experience. This can include having nightmares or flashbacks. Another thing it can include, which is something that I personally experience, is unnecessary thoughts, unwanted thoughts of past abuse. Like you're going through your day, everything's fine, and then all of a sudden, boom, memory. Avoiding, and it's not necessarily a flashback either. It will be just you're remembering it almost in a loop in your mind, but it's not necessarily your whole body that's feeling it. It's just the memory of it. It's hard to explain, but that's a thing. So avoiding certain situations. You might avoid situations or activities such as large crowds or driving that remind you of the traumatic event. This also includes keeping yourself preoccupied to avoid thinking about the event. I do both, so I actually just don't go to my hometown anymore because there's so many places there that are triggering for me. I just stay away, and I like to keep myself occupied with a lot of things during the day so that I can control my triggers. That's why I do YouTube. That's why I make videos. I can sit down and edit and zone out for 2-3 hours, and during those 2-3 hours, I am not triggered at all. I'm in a great mood. I'm doing what I love and I'm having fun. Changes in beliefs and feelings about yourself and others. This can include avoiding relationships with other people, not being able to trust others, or believing the world is very dangerous. I've just come to the conclusion that the world is very dangerous and everyone is actually out to get you and expose you and be cruel to you, because it's been proven to me over and over again. So I don't know if that's actually a symptom. I think that's just a real thing. Hyperarousal. Hyperarousal is probably one of the main ones that I experience, refers to constantly being on alert or jittery. For example, you might have a hard time sleeping or concentrating. You might also be unusually startled by loud or unexpected noises. I do have this. If a door opens too quickly and makes a noise, I jump. If, there's a lot of noises out there actually that if they happen, I will jump out of my seat. And I've had to talk myself out of a panic attack before because of a very loud bang noise, because of past abuse stuff, Somatic symptoms. These refer to physical symptoms that don't have any underlying medical cause. For example, when something reminds you of the traumatic event, you might feel dizzy or nauseated. I do feel dizzy. I've actually had the entire room spin on me, and then I've had to sit down. I have blackouts, which is if I am really, really reminded of it and triggered and having a flashback, for example, I will all of a sudden have black just kind of come over my eyes, and it will be almost like a bunch of blobs of black just like come over my eyes, and then it's almost like I will black out. Symptoms of CPTSD. Now, these are kind of like the extra symptoms, People with CPTSD typically have the above PTSD symptoms along with additional symptoms including lack of emotional regulation. And I know you're all going to make fun of my speech impediment too while I'm trying to read through this. We all know. We just rip me apart for everything out here on the interweb. This refers to having uncontrollable feelings. such as explosive anger or ongoing sadness. I just get explosive anger. Basically, if something makes me mad, I just get explosive anger. It takes me a while to get it too, but people just like to push. Changes in consciousness. This can include forgetting the traumatic event or feeling detached from your emotions or body, which is also called dissociation. And I have had that before. Actually, I have had situations where it is almost like I am watching myself from above. That's happened to me a couple times. Luckily, that hasn't happened to me in a very long time. Like, a lot of these symptoms were real troublesome for me when I was like 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. The drugs didn't help either, by the way. And like, that's why I use them, right? I was trying to self-medicate my my CPTSD. It doesn't work. Don't ever do that. That doesn't work. So, I have dissociated. However, I don't dissociate anymore. That's something that I haven't experienced in a really long time. And I think it's because I have dealt with most of my past stuff. It's just, I'm dealing with new stuff now. New stuff. Negative self-perception. You may feel guilt or shame to the point that you feel completely different from other people. Yeah, I do. I do. And I am. I am completely different from other people. And then people remind me of that every single day. It's beautiful. Difficulty with relationships. You might find yourself avoiding relationships with other people out of mistrust or a feeling of not knowing how to interact with others. On the other hand, some might seek relationships with people who harm them because it feels familiar. Well, I've definitely done the latter. And also, I might have the opposite problem, which is where I had trusted too much. It's like if I do feel like somebody's a good person, then I might automatically trust because I'm just looking for somebody to trust. Not anymore. I was. I will never, ever again. But I'm just saying, I think that was part of my issue. Distorted perception of abuser. This includes becoming preoccupied with the relationship between you and your abuser. It can also include preoccupation with revenge or giving your abuser complete power over your life. This is not really something that I have experienced in terms of my abusers. I don't feel like ever going into it. I don't feel like ever talking about them. I do not wish revenge on them. I do not wish anything. One of them has passed away. I do not wish anything on them at all. However, there was a time when they had complete power over my life when I was in the abusive relationship with them, and I just kind of said, oh, well, I don't care about my life anymore. Whatever happens, happens. And I got into a very dark place where I didn't care if I died the next day or not. It was a very dark place to be in for several years. I'm glad to be out of that now. But so, like, I guess I've experienced that, but not really distorted perception, unless it was like the loving feelings I had while I was still being abused. Loss of systems of meanings. All right, here we go. Systems of meaning refer to your religion or beliefs about the world. For example, you might lose faith in some long-held beliefs you had or develop a strong sense of despair or hopelessness about the world. I mean, is there something wrong with that, though? I think for people like myself that have just had constant trauma, like since birth until their 30s, like, we just kind of give up. Like, we're like, there is no hope. Everybody is out to get you. What do you mean? Every time I trust someone, they mess me over. Why would I have hope in the world? So I don't know if this is fair. This is just not fair to me. I think that we need to do that to protect ourselves, because apparently there's a lot of people out here in the world that will try to use this against us to hurt us more. So I think that if you do have this, you probably should not trust anyone, and you should kind of feel like yeah, there's no hope in this world. Definitely not in 2020, let me tell you. It's important to note that symptoms of both PTSD and CPTSD can vary widely between people and even within one person over time. For example, you might find yourself avoiding social situations for a period of time only to start seeking potentially dangerous situations months or years later. Is that what happened? If you're close to someone with CPTSD, it's also important to remember that their thoughts and beliefs might not always match up with their emotions. They might know that logically they should avoid their abuser, however, they might also hold on to a sense of affection towards them. Yeah, that happens, I guess. What causes CPTSD? Not an ass grab. Definitely not. Like, that's what, anyway. Researchers are still trying to figure out exactly how traumatic stress affects the brain and leads to conditions like CPTSD. However, studies on animals suggest that trauma can have lasting effects on the amygdala, hippocampus, and prefrontal cortex. These areas play a big role in both our memory function and how we respond to stressful situations. Any type of long-term trauma over several months or years can lead to CPTSD. Any type. So there's a lot of people in this world that maybe were veterans or they're friends with veterans, and they seem to think that unless you went to war, you have nothing to find traumatic. The only traumatic thing in the world is going to war. However, if you have ever had someone that you thought that you loved for several years grab you, hold you up against a wall with a knife to your throat and threaten death on you for several hours, I think that it's okay for you to have CPTSD or PTSD, and it doesn't make you a weak person just because you didn't go to war. I'm just going to throw that out there. However, it seems to appear frequently in people who have been abused by someone who was supposed to be their caregiver or protector, especially parents. If you grew up in a household that was extremely abusive or had addiction issues, there is a very big chance that you can end up with CPTSD in your adult life, because it was your caregiver, or who's also your protector, that abused you. And when you are abused as a child, that can have long-lasting effects forever, unfortunately. And there's nothing you can do about it because you were just a child. Examples include survivors of human trafficking or ongoing childhood sexual abuse by a relative. Exactly. Other examples of long-term trauma include ongoing physical, emotional, or sexual abuse, being a prisoner of war, living in an area of war for long periods of time, ongoing childhood neglect. Are there any risk factors? While anyone can develop CPTSD, some people may be more likely to develop it than others. Aside from having past traumatic experiences, risk factors include underlying mental illness such as anxiety or depression, or a family history of it. Unfortunately, I don't know my family history. I was adopted, so I don't really know. Inherited personality traits, which is often referred to as temperament, how your brain regulates hormones and neurochemicals, especially in response to stress, lifestyle factors such as not having a strong support system or having a dangerous job. How is it diagnosed? CPTSD is still a relatively new condition, so some doctors aren't aware of it. This can make it hard to get an official diagnosis, and you might be diagnosed with PTSD instead of CPTSD. There's no specific test for determining whether you have CPTSD, but keeping a detailed log of your symptoms can help your doctor make a more accurate diagnosis. Try to keep track of when your symptoms started, as well as any changes in them over time. Once you find a doctor, they'll start by asking about your symptoms, as well as any traumatic events in your past. For the initial diagnosis, you likely won't need to go into too much detail if it makes you feel uncomfortable. Next, they may ask about any family history of mental illness or other risk factors. Make sure to tell them about any medications or supplements you take, especially if they're from MLMs, please, as well as any recreational drugs you use. That is that's important, because if you are using, that can obviously add to your symptoms. So please do, when you do go, don't hide that. Don't say you're sober if you're not. It's very important to always tell your doctor what you're doing, even in terms of recreational drugs that you're using during this time. I did, and it helped me a lot. Try to be honest as you can with them so they can make the best recommendations for you, and they will help put you in drug treatment therapy if that's needed as well. So again, please do go to them with that. Tell them. If you've had symptoms of post-traumatic stress for at least a month and they interfere with your daily life, your doctor will likely start with a diagnosis of PTSD. Depending on the traumatic event and whether you have additional symptoms, such as ongoing relationship problems or trouble controlling your emotions, and also like long-term trauma that's in your past, they may diagnose you with CPTSD. Keep in mind that you may need to see a few doctors before you find someone you feel comfortable with. Yes, and please keep going until you do find someone you feel comfortable with. Your comfort level is most important in your treatment, because eventually you are going to be doing trauma counseling and stuff, and you need to feel comfortable with your doctor, your social workers, your psychiatrists. You are allowed to tell them if you're not feeling comfortable. Please do use your rights. This is very normal, especially for people dealing with post-traumatic stress. Yes, those of us with PTSD or CPTSD, we especially need to feel comfortable. It is utmost important that we do. My diagnosis, I went to a few different doctors myself. I found a really great place where I could go and talk to somebody that actually specialized in PTSD eventually, and that's who diagnosed me. For 2 years, I was diagnosed as having borderline. At first, they thought I had borderline maybe with histrionic, like it could be one of the two. They weren't really sure. They were like, you have a lot of emotions and you lash out sometimes, and then, you got depression and abandonment issues and things like this, and you might have these two things. So I basically got diagnosed as possibly one of those, and then continued on to see doctors and seek treatment. And finally, I found several, well, it was always kind of up in there, because you don't have flashbacks and triggers and nightmares when you have borderline or histrionic. I have all those things. So it was always kind of like, but you have nightmares and you like treatment. You seek treatment. Usually people with borderline or histrionic, they don't seek treatment. They are involuntary clients a lot of the time, and they don't want to do the work given to them. Whereas I was the opposite. I was there going, please help me. Please give me the work. What can I do to get through this? What do I have to do to get better? So they sent me to go see somebody that specialized in PTSD, because they were like, I think you might have gotten misdiagnosed as borderline. This is not working. So I did, and of course they said, yes, you probably do. And ever since, every doctor I have talked to since is like, yes, you have CPTSD, you have CPTSD. And it's an ongoing treatment. I'm probably going to be in treatment for it for the rest of my life. I'm probably going to be on medication for it for the rest of my life. I might have a few months here or there where I honestly, I need to take a break from treatment and trauma counseling and constant counseling, because when you've been doing it since the age of 9 until 33, it gets a little bit much, and sometimes you just need a break. A lot of people don't realize how stressful even just the counseling for this is. Even if you are getting help, it doesn't mean that you go get help. Everyone's like, go get help. It doesn't mean you go start seeing a doctor and then all of a sudden everything's great and fixed again. I've been seeing doctors since I was 9 years old for my mental health, and psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers, all the above, always been on top of it. But that doesn't mean that if something new occurs that could be traumatic, that it won't send me back. And that's kind of the problem with CPTSD, is you could be doing well for years and years and years, and then all of a sudden have one traumatic experience that reminds you of past experiences even, and then you can fall back. And then the internet will cancel you for it, and it's a lot of fun. So guys, I hope that maybe educated you in some way, maybe even about me a little bit, since apparently we have some questions, and just about complex post-traumatic stress disorder as a whole. I was never going to bring this up on my channel. However, as we know, it has been exposed about me for months. People have been questioning me for months. People have been trying to expose even my sexual assault for months. I cannot do that. I have a publication ban, and I am actually going through court. The only thing I can say is that I was grabbed when I was coming off the elevator. If I go into any more details, it can actually mess up my case. I am not going to be on Chris Hansen. I am not going to be opening up a GoFundMe. I don't really know why it's even a thing, why it's a deal. However, the internet will do what the internet does. And I will probably just keep educating like I do, because I don't do drama. I do educate. All right, that we'll make that a verb. I do educate. So I hope that you are all having a fabulous, fabulous day. I know I am. I really hope that whatever you're doing this weekend for Easter is fantastic. I hope you get to spend time with family, friends. I know with the coronavirus, it's probably a very weird holiday for everyone. I know that some of us are probably not all gathering with family like we usually would with this. A lot of people can't travel, so it's putting a little oh my goodness, can I not talk? It's putting a little damper on Easter weekend. So I don't know, maybe we can all just kind of have our own Easter in the way that we want and eat some chocolate, watch some Netflix, log off the internet, and have a fabulous, fabulous weekend. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one. Happy Easter! Bye!